somewhat slower but kind of funny. It was awesome.
Cool.
I had to watch it about two, three times to get half the jokes. Like I'll sometimes put movies on in the background. I'm doing work, and the more I
Hmm.
watched it, the funnier it got. But I can understand why most people were like, "What?"
So you either have to be kind of drunk or high to kind of get the jokes.
Or just not really paying attention. Like if you sit there and you're like, "All right, let's get into this movie," you're gonna be like a little disappointed.
Right.
How'd you get into podcasting?
Hmm? Why did I get into podcasting?
Yeah,
So I got COVID back in 2020 when that whatever variant came out that was actually killing people. And I was having a seizure on the floor. And I was been debating literally the day before with a coworker. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a podcast. But then it's like, oh, what about Twitter mobs and this and that? And he's like, just fucking do it. You're small anyways. No one cares about you. They're not going to get any clout trying to kill you, kind
that's
of
funny.
thing. So and that's where then I had COVID on the floor, seizing like a dog. So once I blacked out for like 2 days, and in that blackout, I remember saying to myself, fuck this. If I'm going to be getting myself in trouble, it's for what I want. So started it
Yeah,
once
might
I
as well do
was
something
able to
you
move.
enjoy, right?
Right. So that's what started it. Then it was just easy for me to like talk to business guys. Like I found a website to message people. I'm like, hey, can you get on my show? And they're like, new, this and that. But all the business guys are like down totally. And that's just kind of talk to all of them. And that's how I just grew. Now I talk to everyone.
The crazy thing is, I mean, people just like talking about themselves. Let's be honest.
Wait, I
You
learned
want
that
to
the
talk
quick way
about
with this.
yourself for 40 minutes? Yes.
Of course. Um, so what inspired you to do your publishing company?
Well, a little bit of everything, honestly. My mom, before she passed away, was big into the arts. She was an artist, and then her health kind of took her ability to do art. I tried to get her to get to it. She couldn't find center. She was a painter, and she had had strokes and nerve disorders. And I was like, "Man, that might make your art even better. Come on, like let's do this."
Or the modern art trend
I,
now?
I wasn't thinking of it from somebody who could do things. I'm not gonna say easily, but like certain things came from all the work she put in, she could do it, right? And then now she was
Hmm.
struggling really hard to do something simple. Like how defeating that was. I was more like, hey, we can make some money.
Okay.
Watchmymomstruggle.com, and and I had written two books in my 20s and threw them in a shelf, and they just kind of floated around everywhere I moved. And right before COVID, I had reached out to this editor guy I'd done work with for, dang it, I'm just gonna, sorry about this. Come on, come on. Um, there we go. For an editor, I ghost wrote blogs for years, and for banks and all random stuff. I'm really good at just quick write content writing, and he was really brutal. Like I mean, mean. And I was like, you know what? I got these books. I'm gonna send them to Ben, who's really brutal because I trust that. Like I know he'll be honest. Because a lot of times, you're sending it out in the world, and you're like, I'm sure anyone will take my money. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, it's great. Yeah, keep sending me more. And as I started the process, I realized how hard it was. And I found a couple of agents who liked my writing, and they told me, uh, they're like, if you go to the big five, they're gonna make you change the way you write. Kind of the CBS television, if you're like an indie,
Mhm.
movie producer, indie TV guy. Like, but if you have a following from being self-published, you'll they're not going to make you change it. And I was like, well, what do you consider a following? Like, honestly, if you're selling like a couple thousand books a year, that's a following. Like, publishing's hard. Like, okay. So the more I looked into it, I was like, well, if I'm going to do all this work, I might as well repeat it for other people. Like, I like logos. I'm a big fan of logos. I can even get my book Puma hat on, my editing platform.
It's cool.
Um, and so I created a logo, created a company, and I realized real fast that like if you're self-published, you can't really apply for a lot of awards. But if you have a
Mhm.
publishing company, you can. Look, I quickly learned that just being an indie publisher, even for myself, right? And like two people I met, my first two authors, this guy Andrew and Jordan in Amarillo, opened up a lot of doors. And what started as just kind of this small project for myself and maybe a couple of local guys in Amarillo started to get traction. And then I met my now vice president, Madison, who moved home during COVID from New York. She worked at Workman Publishing, one of the largest publishers in New York. And then my editorial director, who had worked for newspapers all over the place, he's actually now doing movies. Ricky's amazing. Like he went from being afraid to do a video on social media to starring in Tyler, like having speaking roles in Tyler Perry movies. Like his story is amazing.
That's cool.
And it just kind of became a group of us just kind of coming together and empowering each other to just make good work and kind of make mistakes together, kind of on my dime, but still, you know. And then we realized we needed more than just a publishing company because we were getting a lot of bad manuscripts. I don't mean bad like the story was bad. For example, I had somebody hand me a book they already self-published, and in the first 10 pages there was four different fonts. Like
Ooh, yeah, that's not good.
there's bad, and then there's like lazy bad, and then there's like did you forget to take your meds? And I don't mean it in a rude way. I mean like do you have a handler? Like mental health's important, and it's like did somebody tell you to stop? Like it's something like you couldn't have like hit select all like courier news like nothing
Yeah, put it all aerial or whatever.
and it's like man I am tired of just getting bad work and or finding people who just don't realize how good they are. So we created a publish and editing company alongside of it. And it's just kind of become trying to solve problems little by little by little. And we can only publish so many people. So the cool part about Book Puma is we can help hundreds, if not thousands of people get published. Whereas with Blue Handle, I can only publish 4 to 6 people a year because it's expensive. You know, I don't, we don't take money at Blue Handle. I invest. So I'll spend 50 to 100 grand a year investing in authors um to whether it's marketing editing you just salaries of our employees and if I make half that back you know where Book Puma helps us kind of keep the lights on but it also helps us kind of reinvest into a lot of authors. We actually had a couple different people recently do some social media lives where like when you told me what how affordable it was I was like how bad's the editing going to be?
Right.
It's like it's not. We're trying to make it affordable and not like, you know, take your shirt off your back. We're trying to make it more communal based. I bet is a better way of, you know, pulling it off. So and that's kind of how we got into it. It's just kind of been one project after another.
That's cool. Yeah, I want to say editing, as I've been working on my different stories, and I've had a couple other editors on. The lowest I've seen for pricing for per word is like 4 cents, and I'm like, okay, that sounds cheap, but that's brutal. And some of
Yeah,
them
and then
were
when you
saying like
look at it,
6 or 8 cents a word.
I thousands on my books. My first 6 books, I think I spent something like 20, $30,000 on editing. Um,
Mhm.
we have monthly memberships at Book Puma as low as $40. Someone's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, where you can turn in a couple pages at a time." Because a lot of times you get bad habits in the beginning and you don't realize it's a bad habit, and then now you have to fix that. Had you caught it in the first 10, 20 pages, you wouldn't have done it the next 200. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So our theory behind that is, well, imagine you could just get a few pages looked at. Imagine you could get on the phone with somebody and just get a little bit of coaching so that you can minimize the damage along the way and have somebody like to work with. And more people are like, oh, this is a real thing. I was like, it is. It's not a scam. I swear. I know there's so many out there, but just I wouldn't say scammed because that's how the industry is. It's brutal. I always, the best way to describe it is it's like hiring a contractor to redo your bathroom. They come over and then they give you the plans and they mark everything off and then they leave and they charge you. And you're like, well, I paid you for everything. Like, but it's your bathroom. Don't you want to fix it? And you're like, but you're the expert. I gave you the money.
Right.
Like, and I was like, I remember one of the first big like editing jobs we did. I told the editor, I was like, hey man, you need to do one rough version, right, that has just all the edits, and then you're gonna need to do a clean version where you fix all the edits. And they're like, no. I was like, yeah. And they're like, do you know how hard that is? And I said, yes, I know exactly how hard that is. it's a pain in the butt. And not every person who gets into writing knows how to do that, number one, or wants to do that.
Right.
And this lady quit. She quit over it. She's like, this is stupid. 2 months later, we get a call. She goes, I called my last 10 clients. Every single one wanted me to do that. I am so sorry. Like, I was like, yeah, they're so used to being like, well, this is what we always do. This is what we always do. And I used to have this like chat on my Slack channel with my editorial director, Ricky. And the question was always, is this a real thing? Or did Miss Anderson tell you in the seventh grade you have to do this?
Hmm.
He's like, and he used to kind of get mad at me. And over time, he's like, I'm starting to realize how much stuff we do because Miss Anderson in the seventh grade told us we had to do it.
Right.
It's like, so that's kind of where
Yeah.
Book Boom and Blue Handle came from. I mean, I've got my own books out. I've got four in the Neil Baggio series, one in Marie Perdita, which is a spinoff from Neil Baggio, one Golden Day, which is a really good like graduation book, like relationships and stuff, college. And then I've got three books I'm working on right now on top of I run 11 Jimmy John's franchises that I own, two kids, like I said, my
Whoa.
baseball practice. I'm I don't sleep much. Like I didn't
I was
sleep.
gonna say, how are you sleeping?
I just kind of black out on occasion. But no, like I just go until the battery gives up, and then that's how I start all over again. It's
Right.
kind of how it is. Yeah.
That's wild. So for Puma, what are the have you gotten a lot of good books like potentials for your company from the editing?
Yeah, we actually got three of our current books that are coming out the beginning of 2025. We're all booked Puma clients that we found early and offered. Like one person told me, they're like, "Oh, you're just doing this so you could turn people away and give them editing." I was like, "Oh, it's the opposite." I was like, "It allows me to cherry pick good people before they realize they're good." I was like, she's like, "That's
Right.
rude." It's like I don't mean it in a rude way. I mean like we get a lot of manuscripts sent to us, so I mean usually we tell them this is what I can offer. Feel free and go. I'm like, I don't want to resist anyone's ability to grow. I just don't. Um,
Right.
we're upfront with what we offer, what we can do for them, uh, and if this works for them and that's what they want because they like how upfront we are and how we communicate, then cool. But if not, hey man, we'll help you any way we can. And usually, just the honesty is what most people love. It's because even at work, my restaurants, I just had somebody reach out for an application. I was like, by Monday, I can't guarantee a spot will be available, but you can reach out on Sunday. And I was like, I'm not gonna, not tell you otherwise. I was like, plus, this is how I feel about someone with your history. I was like, just we like to communicate clearly. We like to be upfront. We like to be kind of honest right out the gate. And they were like, well, no, even if I don't get the job, I just still want to sit down and talk to you. That's really refreshing. Thank you. You're welcome. That's just kind of how we try to approach everything. Is one of my favorite phrases is fill the void with information, not
Hmm.
someone's imagination and previous experience. You don't know where they came from, what they know, what they don't know. So don't just assume, take a time and just communicate. So, and that's what
Right.
one of the cool things we do at Book Puma that most editors don't do, at least I've seen, is when we send back a project, we do an audio note. So the editor will reread the whole cover sheet in audio format and send it with the project. The reason being is a lot of us internalize feedback negatively, right? So you may read, you're struggling with commas, see this all the time, you got to get past it. But the editor might read, hey man, you're struggling with commas, you'll get past it. We see this all the time. Tone is
There's a huge
different.
difference.
Right. So you may internalize it as you suck. But if the editor is telling you in this really calm, reassuring tone, now all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, I'll get past it then. And
Mhm.
those little things that maybe take an extra 5 to 10 minutes for the editor make, I think, all the difference in the world for the person receiving that feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a big one as I've like had had an editor for a while for my podcast. And at a certain point she started doing the same thing because she would send me a critique saying, this is absolutely terrible. Like, why did you do it? And I didn't hear her tone. So I'm thinking, Dude, this lady's a bitch. Kind of
And it
thing. And
could have
then
just
she
been
just
like
sent me a
she
voice.
could have been laughing the whole time, right? Like,
Right. Yeah, no, she was.
yeah,
She's like, this is terrible. What do you think you're doing?
yeah. But we hear it as like, you're horrible. You should quit now. Like,
Right.
fine, I'll stop. Like,
I'll do it.
and that's kind of why we're trying to break down those walls. Like even the guy we did one of our books for last year, Ray Franz, The Heights. I always mess this up. He's the great nephew of Al Capone's right hand man. So the guy who no
Ooh.
one knew essentially ran Al Capone's whole operation. He was like hidden from the world. And Al Capone did this on purpose. So that if anything ever happened to Al Capone or somebody, all the businesses would still run.
Mhm.
And most of the families would be taken care of because no one knew who this guy was. So this guy, Ray, is has access to all this family history and decided to write this awesome book. Um, but he had to fictionalize it for safety reasons. And so he wrote it, and we were the only publisher who said it's not done. Like, yeah, you ended it, but I feel like you stopped it like 5 chapters
But
short.
when it got good.
And he's like, well, it's really long. Like we're like, our job is to. I was like, keep writing. If it's super long, we'll turn it into 2 books. Whatever, we'll figure it out. So we invested almost a year. It's like 9 months of editing and coaching of helping him finish the book before we even like got into the re-editing of the book.
Hmm.
It almost became a 2 year process. And I remember he's like, that's the reason he had offers from bigger publishers, but he's like, none of them were going to work with me. They just wanted to slap my name on a book and sell it. And
Yeah.
he's like, I just didn't want to risk my story not being told properly. I guess,
Well, that's a big one.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one for
When
one
you
of my
find out,
friends. There
no,
you
you
go.
go.
I'll say because one of my friends did that. She does a hybrid, so she self-publishes a good chunk of her books, but she has contracts with two of the big fives. Which it took her a while to get there, and that's where she said they just literally are like expect you to pay for everything up front, and then they're like, and you have to market everything too. They don't really other than putting you on a little email newsletter, you have to figure out how to get the books to sell.
Even the big five, I got to meet JT Ellison a few times. She's become good friends with Ricky. And
Mhm.
it was one of the big things I took away the first time I met her. She's like, I took my first big check, my book deal, and bought a PR company. Spent every dollar on marketing.
Mhm.
And she's like, without it, I wouldn't have gotten a second book deal. And it's like
Right.
people don't realize how little most publishers do for you other than distribute. They're just distribution companies. That's all they are. That is it.
Hmm.
They don't. So they're looking for ready-made products, not only books. They're looking for people who know how to market, who know how to function, like who already have an income, or they have like the world's most amazing story. You know what I mean? Like they're already going viral. Otherwise, they're like they won't touch you with a 10 foot pole, and that's the hard
Right.
part. Yeah. So what I was going to say was a lot of the people don't realize the amount of money that goes into and how many books just don't sell, right? So for like every bestseller you see out there, which most a bestseller is 10,000 copies a week for 4 weeks. That's what a bestseller is. So,
Okay.
and even that, you can do that and still not be a bestseller. There's lots of books that sell tons of books, but don't make the bestseller list because they're not with the right publisher. They don't fit into a certain genre. They don't like, so the New York Times best-selling list is actually a very like closed off list. It's all make believe. Um, that's why USA Today has their own. That's why you can sell 1 million books on Amazon tomorrow and not make the best selling. It's
Interesting.
a really weird thing. Yes. Now that being said,
But I heard
the average book is sells less than 100 copies a year. Average. This is a legit thing. They do these numbers every couple of years. They double check. For every $1 million seller, million books, you have thousands of authors that sell less than 10 copies a year. That's the realistic,
that's a
and including the big five. They will sign author after author after author that will literally die. And like their book will just sit on a shelf for 2 months and then end up in a warehouse and never get sold. Yeah.
Right.
It's almost
So,
better to self-publish or find an indie because then at least you have some control, right? Like
right.
if it takes you 5 years, it takes you 5 years. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell talks about it took him like 6 years to get Turning Point off the ground. He literally like went around the country talking about it nonstop until it finally took off. Like it wasn't an overnight success. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, for your publishing company, are there any specifics or genres that you're looking for? Any topics that may be off the table because it's just too controversial?
I would say controversial topics are because I'm the one investing money, right? So like um we'll work with you like through Book Puma, which we've had a couple come to us that are pretty pretty controversial that I'm like not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But we were able to work with them, get them the right services they need through our Book Puma platform. We do like a concierge service where it's not hybrid where we own it. We literally will do everything for you. Almost like if you've ever hired a web developer where they'll create like a generic email address that you share on Google, like, Chad and Brad's podcast at Gmail. You know what I mean? Like, and then we'll create everything. We'll literally go into an Amazon account. We'll create everything. We'll share it with you and get you on Amazon, get you an Ingram Spark account, get you an ISBN, get you everywhere you need to be. We'll get it all taken care of. And I'm on a podcast crew, like I told you, I'm talking to somebody. So if you're done, just get in the car and wait a minute. I told you just batting keys, but I'm talking to somebody live. So put your bag away and then sit down.
It's all good. I'll cut that out.
My 11-year-old. Man, it's not even a practice. Which means after this, he's going to be like, so can we go back to DBAD and work out for another 2 hours? Because I haven't sweated up. I'm being serious. This kid's nuts. Love him, but he's nuts. Um, so train of thought. So when we're working with controversial people, um, we have this concierge service, not just with any, but with any person, we have a concierge service where we will work with them and we will set everything up so that they will access it themselves. And then once we're done, they we can wash our hands of it. Like here's your logins, here's everything. Now, we actually have two government, like smaller government contracts that we're working with. Like one's like a VFW, like a small military um guy, him and his buddies put together this book and they wanted us to help us like keep tabs on it. So like every month they keep us on this like small stipend. I think we're charging $20 a month. Like it's not much. You just keep tabs on it, make sure there's no issues. Like it's literally, I even feel bad charging them $20 a month. They're like, we gotta charge you something. I'm like, okay. So we go in, make selling. It's on all the platforms. We answer emails from Ingram or Amazon. Like, hey, your book has an error in this corner, that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
And so we have those kind of services that we originally weren't trying to do, but so many people have asked for them. We just started doing it.
Fair enough.
And that has been kind of one of my more favorite ones because it's just kind of been organic. We actually kept fighting it, not wanting to do it, but so many people kept asking for it. We were like, all right, I guess we're going to do it. And so if let's say you're self-published or you want to be self-published, but you're like, man, I don't even know where to start. We could literally sit down with you and go, all right, here's the list of things to do. If you're really busy and you're like, I have enough time to write and I can work on this. I don't have time for this stuff. Cool. We can do this for you. And we can go because we know what to do. This stuff takes us 20 minutes, not 3 hours. Right.
Right.
And it allows us to just kind of, and we're not putting somebody at $60 and putting somebody at $10 an hour. We're not charging you, absurd amount of money to knock this stuff out. We'll set it up for you, walk you through how to maintain it. And then again, because Book Puma, we have these monthly memberships. We could just keep someone in the platform. So if they have a question, they can call me like, hey man, can you help me with this? Yeah, what do you need? And it just becomes this again, it's like having a buddy. Like, hey man, can you help me with this? Yep, what do you need? As opposed to being this like earth-shattering cost. And that's the biggest thing we've been trying to do. When it comes to what do we sign, what do we not sign? At one point, I thought I'd never sign a children's book, but we've got one coming out next year because they're kind of a pain to publish. but it's gotten a little better. Um, the problem with children's books is everybody's got an idea for a children's book, but they're never executed. So it's like, I got this idea. It's like, well, do you have art? Do you have this? Well, no. Then you have an idea, you don't have a book. Um, so we tried to stay away from those. Um, and honestly, the only issue I run into with commercial books is a lot of them aren't written well. Like, if it was written well, I'd be more open to it. So it's like sometimes I feel like the idea is controversial, but the writing's crap. Like,
Right.
yeah, or there's no depth to it, right? It's just anger. We had like one story that some guy sent us that was like essentially just talking about how the world was better when women were in their place, and that it was a story, but that was essentially the whole theme, and it was like, okay, so what was the girl's name that broke up with you? Like, oh my god, and it
Right.
was only like thirty
What's her
thousand
name?
words. It was like a short story
Oh, that's
essentially,
yeah.
and it was like, and we kept saying, what's the plot of the story? Like, he's like, you don't understand. He kept saying, you don't understand. It's like, no, you don't. There's no plot. The main character is just mad. It's the plot. It's like, no, that's motivation. That's not a
Right.
thing. So the only downside I would say to a lot of the controversial stuff is that a lot of them lack depth. I feel like if you have more depth, understanding, and thought out stuff, you may have a controversial idea or two, and the topic may be controversial, right? Like Dan Brown, when he came out, was quote unquote controversial, but in the thick of things, when you read the book itself wasn't controversial, right? There was a
Right.
few themes that were
Yeah.
controversial. It
Yeah. Themes or
became
scenes.
controversial because of a couple of topics in the book, right? The book itself wasn't that controversial, right? So, like, see what I'm saying? Like, so in that aspect, yes. Now, if somebody were to just be like, like Jesus got kids, they're like, okay, like, but what's the idea behind it? Okay, but what's you know what I mean? Like, you gotta figure it out. So I'm not against anything. I will say no to. I would never say no to anything that's well written. I would at least read it. But the problem is most of them kind of struggle. I mean, technically, Black Bear Lake, which is a really good seller of ours, by an award-winning playwright, it technically is a story about two cousins that kind of fall for each other in the summer, like over a summer, and explore more than they should. And it's
Right.
kind of based on a true story. That's kind of, I mean, that's pretty controversial in the grand scheme of things. I mean, now it's not saying, oh, you go explore yourself with your cousin, but you know, so we're not like, oh, everything's got to be CVS vanilla. But if the writing is done well, I'll let things slide.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, because I'm gonna say one of my friends, he's working on a story, and there's a lot. He does a lot of political divisiveness. You making like one villain looks like they're doing this, another villain's doing this, kind of thing. I told him, my dude, people don't think that complex, so they're gonna think you're being divisive with feminism and divisive with Christianity. But like he does
If
intertwine it, and
it's
it's very
done
vital.
well, though, like if the writing is done well, you should upset some people, but that's okay. West
Right.
Wing's one of my favorite shows, and people used to call him, Aaron Sorkin, the biggest left wing nut job. If you go back and watch that show, he constantly poked fun at his own party all the time.
Mhm.
But because he bloviated against the right a decent amount, nobody even noticed. So it's like people have a tendency to only see what they want to see. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's why I said, so if the writing's done well, you can make any, you know what I mean? You can make anything work.
Okay, cool. I say we're starting to get up on the limit for the Zoom call, and it looks like you got other stuff to do. Is there anything specific you want to talk about or share with the people?
I would say when it comes to writing, just be upfront with yourself and honest and realize everything you will write today will feel like crap tomorrow because you get better with reps in anything you do. Um, the Every author's favorite book is the last thing they wrote. Every page they wrote today is crap compared to the one they're going to write in 10 years. Reps do make you better. So, that being said, do not fall in love with what you wrote today. Be open to the idea that you wrote something amazing, but it's going to take some work to make it better. I've gone through it, every writer's gone through it, and know that if you want a 90,000 word story, you're probably going to have to write 120 and you're going to have to edit it down to 85 and then fill it back up to 90. Like it's going to take some work. To think that it's not, then you're not ready, which is okay. And I always try to tell people
Right.
that's okay. Like it's okay to not be ready. It's okay to struggle. I used to always say, I get mad, then I get mad, then I get mad, and then I fix it. I got so angry at the world at one point, I created my own publishing company. Right? Like I was like, you know, I was like, I'm not gonna just be self-published. I'm gonna do this. I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out. You know,
Right.
so being angry is okay. Just don't let it stop you. Don't let it take you off the motivation what you want to do. And realize that it's gonna take work. That not everyone's gonna see what you see, which is okay. Some people hate the Beatles. Some people hate Aerosmith. Some people so somehow everyone hated Nickelback, yet they made millions. People still talk
Right.
smack about Hootie and the Blowfish, yet they sold 22 million albums in like 18 months. You know, so somebody bought it. You know, at the end of the day, it's going to take work. There's going to take some feedback, but you'll get better because of it. If you're looking for really good feedback, affordable feedback, reach out to Big Puma. If you think you're ready, reach out to Blue Handle. We're here for you. If you're looking for a good read,
Perfect.
look up Charles D'Amico. I've got plenty of books out.
All right. Definitely will. Thank you. This
Thanks,
has
brother.
been really good and informative.